Welcome back to I'm Glad You're Here. Today we're talking with Dr. Sarah Silverman, who is a holistic sleep specialist. Sarah is a licensed psychologist in Florida and New York and is one of the few sleep specialists in the country who trained at the birthplace of sleep medicine, the Stanford Sleep Medicine Center. So, why are we talking about sleep? I'll be honest and say that Molly 6 months ago might not be so interested in listening to a podcast episode about sleep. The topics I found fascinating felt out of body, like psychedelic experiences and profound spiritual shifts. But I'll be honest, sleep is probably one of the most overlooked and significant parts of healing ourselves. Sleep is power. Dr. Matthew Walker, the author of Why We Sleep, wrote, "Sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each day." In this episode, we talk about the specific ways you can tune into your natural sleep patterns and enhance your sleep hygiene. Sleep is fundamental, yet also personal, and Sarah walks us through some great tactics to connect to your natural rhythm. I personally really enjoyed learning about the concept of chronotypes in this conversation. A chronotype is your body's natural inclination to sleep at a certain time. This episode is filled with amazing tidbits and strategies to enhance your personal sleep routine, and I'm excited for you to give it a listen. So with that, let's get on to the episode. I don't plan these conversations. They're kind of just intuitive and go where they need to go. That's kind of my style. I love it. I've definitely selected sleep and sought this discussion very intentionally. Anyway, I love your mission of empowering women, giving them the tools to improve their sleep. And this podcast is really weaving spirituality, psychology, and really recognizing sleep as a foundational, sacred tool that we often just negate in our self-care. And my intention here is really shining a flashlight on sleep and educating its importance, how that, shift in better habits can really help us overall. And would love to just learn and dive in there with you. And I think it'd be a great place to start with an introduction for you to share your background and how you got to this mission of helping women with their sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today and talk all things sleep. So I am, by formal training, a clinical health psychologist. And throughout my training, I ended up specializing in a small subspecialty of health psychology, which is sleep psychology or behavioral sleep medicine, which is, in a nutshell, targeting any sleep issues from more of a non-pharmacological perspective. So helping women learn how to sleep soundly without medication or without the need for sleep aids. And so through my years of training, I definitely have seen, you name it, as far as sleep disorders and sleep issues. But primarily my focus is on women who have insomnia and circadian rhythm issues, as well as sleep apnea, maybe chronic nightmares, and how they all kind of influence each other. So I tend to see a lot of the more severe cases of insomnia and other sleep issues, and then try to intervene from more of that non-medication approach. And I truly believe that sleep, and in order to get good quality sleep, we have to address the mind, the body, and the spirit. And all of those three have to align in order for sleep to really be at the quality that is desired on a regular basis. And I definitely got into this field for personal reasons because I myself had struggled with sleep for pretty much my whole life. Definitely in middle school and high school, I would notice that I would have trouble falling asleep, or even after a full night of sleep, I wouldn't feel rested. So I would sleep, 8-9 hours, but still wake up feeling like I didn't sleep at all. And so that kind of led me down the rabbit hole. And then, of course, once I started really learning about sleep disorders and how really it impacts every single area of our lifestyle, not just our physical health, but also our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual health. When I really started to learn what was going on behind the scenes, I became so passionate about helping other women learn how to navigate this area, because unfortunately, unless your doctor specializes in sleep medicine, they really don't get much training. So they don't necessarily know how to help or approach sleep in the way that, say, a sleep specialist would. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I'm curious, from your personal experience, would you classify your history and your sleep as kind of more severe, or was that just kind of, I guess, pun intended, waking you up to sleep being this bigger thing?
Yeah. So looking back, I think my sleep problems were probably more on the severe side. And I say that because I have always felt like I have been a night owl. And there are a lot of mixed feelings about whether or not night owls are actually true night owls or whether it's a product of their lifestyle. But after many years of really diving into the science of circadian biology and circadian rhythms, and I've also done a lot of genetic testing and other types of testing, there is actually a genetic component. And I have seen that in my genes, as well as some other testing that I've done over the years as well, where I do actually have a genetic predisposition to having more of a delayed sleep onset. So looking back, it's not necessarily that I had a problem with my sleep or being able to sleep. It was more so about the timing of my sleep was off. So trying to go to bed too early or earlier than my body clock wanted to be asleep. And that is the case for a lot of folks who have circadian rhythm issues or who do feel like they're night owls. So in my case, that would actually be referred to as a delayed sleep phase syndrome, which is one specific type of a circadian rhythm disorder. And it looks like insomnia, difficulty falling asleep. So they're very similar, but the difference with a circadian rhythm disorder is that when someone who has more of this later schedule can actually sleep in their biological sleep schedule, they have no problems falling asleep or staying asleep. So there is definitely a interplay between a lot of different sleep issues. But yeah, I think from my experience and my history of sleep, it certainly gives me both that personal understanding of what might be going on behind the scenes, as well as now having had, over a decade of experience working with folks with similar issues. And a lot of women actually reach out to me because they can relate to maybe being more of a night owl and haven't really had the experience of working with a provider that can actually help them manage their schedule or be able to shift to a schedule that more closely aligns with their biology.
Wow, there's so much in there. So many thoughts are coming to mind of the misconceptions that we hear, or the kind of consumerism side of sleep and getting a
Yeah.
better pillow, or just giving yourself 9 hours of sleep. But if you're going to bed at a really late time for yourself and then waking up early, that can kind of knock you off course. And so I'm curious, I guess first, my mind is going to men and women physiologically. So we're focusing, I know that your work is specifically with women. Is there a difference in circadian rhythm approaches with men and women, given women also have a cycle, a menstrual cycle? And so when treating or looking at circadian rhythm needs of women, is that just a totally different approach?
It's a fantastic question. And the short answer is yes. Women do have very different needs for more of that hormone perspective, which very closely ties to circadian health. And so what I have seen over the years is that, yes, sleep changes throughout the monthly cycle. If a woman is still cycling, sleep also changes during perimenopause and then menopause and then postmenopause. So there are a lot of hormonal shifts that are seen throughout a woman's lifespan that look very different from, say, a men's hormone cycle. And so typically with men, their hormone cycle is about 24 hours. So, things kind of reset each day for them. Whereas in
So
women,
easy.
yeah. In women, it's far more complex in terms of how to approach that from a sleep perspective. And it really is individualized. So the way that I approach each case is a case by case basis, because every woman experiences sleep in different ways. And that could actually change or fluctuate throughout the monthly cycle. And the best example I can give you, because natural sunlight is so closely tied to our circadian rhythm, both in men and women. But in women, sometimes when you get natural light in the morning, and depending on where you're at in your cycle, that can influence the timing of the hormones that are released in the morning, which not only assist in the process of sleep, but also in terms of mood and energy levels during the day. They are very connected. And so sometimes it does take a more nuanced approach to really figure out what is going to be an optimal, what I like to call sleep action plan for each woman. That does sometimes look very different than the way that I might approach it for a man whose hormones, again, kind of reset after 24 hours. So it really depends on each person.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess, is there like a general structure of how someone can start connecting better to their sleep, how a woman can kind of take in information and start to tinker around?
Yes. So the best place to start, in my opinion, is with natural light, connecting back to sunlight. And I know there's a lot of stigma around, the sun is bad, but the sun and getting natural sunlight does so much for our sleep, for our hormones, for our mood, for our energy levels. It really does impact all of our daily functions. So the first place that I would suggest starting would be to get back in touch with light and dark, and specifically aiming for natural sunlight in the morning. And I'd say ideally within the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking up. So the timing of that may look different for each person depending on what your wake up time is. But ideally getting natural sunlight within that first 30 to 60 minutes to really connect back to how sunlight essentially starts the cascade of hormone regulation for the day. And it's the timing that we get that light in the morning that really tells the brain when we should be getting sleepy each night. So it very much is our brain is waiting for that timing signal in terms of when we should be feeling sleepy each night. So connecting with natural sunlight in the morning, and just to tie that together, what I also suggest is waking up at the same time each morning, ideally every day of the week, including weekends and non-work days, which I know is not necessarily fun.
Mm-hmm.
But our bodies don't know the difference between Monday through Friday and the weekends. Our bodies know that we need to be on a 24-hour-ish cycle in order to sync with our environment. So it is actually one of the best steps to take to really start getting back in touch with circadian rhythms and making sure that they're regulated. So waking up at the same time each morning, followed by increasing that morning sunlight within the first hour or so after waking up. Sans sunglasses is ideal as well. Now, of course, you don't want to look directly at the sun, but you do want those natural rays to be able to get into your eyeballs. And then on the other side is dark. So in the hours leading up to bedtime, really thinking about minimizing that artificial blue light exposure that we get from screens, but we also get that from our overhead lights. And a lot of folks forget like the lights that we have in our homes, apartments, and, even if you're out at dinner, those lights can also emit a lot of artificial blue and green light that can ultimately disrupt our sleep-wake cycle because they do have an impact on our hormones. So ideally, starting to minimize the artificial blue light starting after sunset. But ideally, I'd say, I like to be realistic as well.
Yeah.
At least,
Modern.
yeah, at least I would say 30 minutes to an hour before bed, if possible. Transition to doing something that's screen free, something that is both enjoyable and calming. But that way, your brain kind of has a little bit of a wind down or buffer zone where you're not getting that artificial light and preventing those negative effects on your overall sleep quality.
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of sounds like a very simple process of just
Mhm.
training your body, giving it the right cues, giving it light
Exactly.
on, we're up, light off, we're going to sleep and we're shutting down. But with all the stimulus of light pollution or being in a dark room and not getting sunlight, our body's like, am I tired? Am I awake? Am I sleeping? And it's confused. So
Yeah,
you're just give it the consistency. Tell it when you're going
exactly.
to sleep, when you're waking up, and try to keep that habitual so it's keeping that circadian 24-hour clock.
Exactly. That's such a great summary. Absolutely. And it is all about the consistency. And of course, no one is expected to be perfect, but the more consistent that you can keep that consistent wake up time, the morning light, giving your brain the right cues, the right signals, and then ultimately also minimizing or restricting that artificial blue light in the evening, the more that your brain really does start to kind of retrain itself and keep things regular. And sleep regularity and keeping that consistency, although yes, it's incredibly simple, it is often challenging to stick
Mm-hmm.
to in the world that we live in. That is truly the best place to start.
Yeah, let's talk about how it's hard because something else that's coming up for me is sleeping with your partner, having different schedules. Someone works a night shift and doesn't come home at the same time, and wanting to co-regulate with your partner, but also listen to your internal clock. So I'm curious what kind of support you offer people that are kind of trying to balance that.
I love this question because, yes, it is so common to have a partner that maybe doesn't have the same sleep schedule or maybe has a different work schedule, as you said. And I'll backtrack for a second and just highlight that each of us has our own, what's called chronotype, our own unique
Mm.
sleep wake cycle, our own unique circadian rhythm. And most of us are not going to have the exact same chronotype or rhythm as our partner. And that's okay. But I think coming up with a compromise and figuring out kind of a happy medium for both partners is ideal. And so that is really where I would come in, and kind of the support that I would provide is how can we compromise and make it so that
Mhm.
we can best align both partners' schedules. And for reference, there are some folks who I may identify as more of a morning chronotype. So like to go to sleep early, wake up early. Then there are folks who have more of an evening delayed chronotype, like to go to bed late, wake up late. And then there are folks who kind of fall somewhere in between, which is usually, I'd say, the majority of the population. So kind of what's
Yeah.
considered a typical
And
chronotype.
and this is, sorry, the chronotype is something that you naturally kind of, that's your body's natural law, or is that okay, so that's not circumstantial. That's like my body prefers this time shift.
Correct. Yep. It's
Okay.
your body's preference for where it would like to be asleep and like to wake up.
And how do you find that given how off we are from our natural self?
I know. So the best way to be able to find your chronotype would be to free sleep. And so of course that's sometimes really hard to do if you're, working all the time. So I always tell folks, like when you're on vacation or you're taking a trip, just free sleep. Don't set an alarm. Just kind of go to bed when you naturally feel sleepy and then wake up naturally and see where your schedule falls.
Oh,
And
I
that
love
is
that.
usually the best way to be able to tell. And I'd say most folks kind of know where they would prefer to sleep. And so, sometimes we're not able to sleep in that window because of our responsibilities, especially with work, school, kids, you name it, that can kind of shift our schedule. But yeah, ideally having a week or two where you can just free sleep, that would truly be the best way to get a sense of your natural bedtime and wake up time. But it is fixed for the most part. So it is thought to be this genetic predisposition where it's already predetermined where your body would prefer to go to bed and wake up. So ideally, if you can sleep in that natural window, you're going to get the best quality sleep because all of your rhythms are going to be aligned. And not just your sleep-wake rhythm, but we also have a bunch of other circadian rhythms like our eating, fasting rhythms, our rest activity rhythms. So they're all connected and influenced by your individual biology.
Wow. Okay. So this chronotype, this is kind of the root that brings it all together, that syncs it
I would
all.
agree. Yes. Yes,
Wow.
I would agree with that. And in the sleep community, we like to think about chronotype as kind of being on a spectrum. So some people will fall more morning, some people will fall more evening. And then, again, most people are going to be somewhere in between. But it is fixed, it is predetermined. And most people, especially for those who I'd say are very early birds, they're very morning type or they're very night owl type, that usually also dates back to childhood. And they kind of have a sense of always feeling like they identified with one side versus the other. And that does also kind of carry into adulthood. So
That's
usually,
helpful. Okay.
yeah. And usually I see most folks who are the night owls, just because in the world that we live in, it is often very difficult for those who are extreme night owls to be able to work a day shift.
Yeah. Are you saying an
So
extreme night owl is someone that will go to bed at like 2 or 3 a.m.? Oh,
correct.
yeah. Wow.
That's me.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So 2 to 3 a.m. as an example of a natural sleep time. And then usually wake up time is 10, 11, 12 or into the early afternoon. And I have seen folks really across the 24-hour period as far as their different sleep schedules. The most severe case of having more of this delayed sleep phase that I've seen was someone who actually preferred to sleep 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So when the rest of the world is working, they're sleeping. And so, of course, that is extremely rare, but there are some folks who do have a very shifted sleep schedule. And it's also thought to be kind of this evolutionary adaptation. Because if you think back to our, ancestor days, it didn't make sense for all of us to be asleep at the exact same time, or we wouldn't have survived as a species. So the idea is, there had to always be someone up at all
Yeah.
times of the day versus night in order to protect the tribe, so
Wow.
to speak.
I'm also thinking of time zones. In our modern day, it's almost like a little hack could be if you are a night owl living on the East Coast and working remotely for the West Coast, or even,
Yes.
shifting back further and giving
Yes.
yourself that freedom. Like I'm supposed to, I end work at 8 p.m., then I have my
Yeah.
dinner, then I'm going to wind down by 10, 11. So you can kind of hack it that way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And folks who do say hack their sleep schedule that way, where maybe they do live on the East Coast and then their job is, say, on the West Coast. I mean, that's like a perfect solution here. That isn't always possible, of course, but yeah, I mean, that's what sleep support is all about, is kind of figuring out how can we manage this? How can we, shift accordingly in more of a non-medication way so that this becomes a long-term plan, a long-term solution. And then ideally for all of the folks that I work with, if you could get to a point where you can pick your work schedule or have that flexibility, that is going to really be the ideal treatment, so to speak, so that you can work and sleep in your aligned schedules.
Yeah, yeah. And then so going back to now partnership and kind of that compromise with chronotypes, what can that look like?
Fantastic question. So I guess I will share an example with you since you brought up someone who may work the night shift. So let's say one partner does work maybe overnights or maybe a later shift, that third shift, or again, overnight shifts, and the other partner doesn't. What I typically recommend for folks is to kind of think about a time of day that they both have free and use that time as time to connect. So whether that is, doing something that both partners enjoy, whether it's, cooking a meal or preparing a meal together, or potentially watching a good show, a comfort show or a movie, but really trying to figure out what time of day they can both align and really prioritize that time for the relationship. And then if it is closer together where maybe it's like a couple hours later that one partner prefers to go to bed versus the other. Sometimes there is a desire to say go to bed together, but maybe one partner is lying there for a couple hours just waiting to fall asleep while the other partner falls asleep in 5 minutes, right? So the compromise there would be, for the partner who maybe it does take a little bit longer to fall asleep, really using that time before their partner falls asleep to, again, really think about doing an activity that is ideally screen-free, but really something that is enjoyable to both partners. And then usually what I would recommend for the partner that maybe takes a little bit longer to fall asleep, to get out of bed and engage in an activity that is enjoyable or calming to that partner. And then when that partner starts to feel sleepy, then get into bed. So it often is tweaks in behaviors or habits around sleep, but really thinking about a compromise in terms of when both partners can align and engaging in an activity that both enjoy.
I love that. What I'm hearing there is kind of taking the joint activity of sleeping and taking that pressure off, finding a time that works during the day to connect, to find that partnership, that activity, that moment of deep connection so that there's no pressure on sleep being that deep connection. And I also like, it reminds me of, I'm curious your opinion. I think you'll agree that the bed is for sleeping and you shouldn't be doing other activities in there.
Yes.
Yeah. So then, because you mentioned the whole, like the partner who's not ready for bed, okay, you can sit there for a bit, your partner falls asleep, then go do something that does make you tired, that does engage you until you're tired enough to go to bed, in bed.
Yes. So yeah, the whole idea of bed equals sleep, that is actually part of a technique that falls under the umbrella of cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, which is considered the first-line treatment approach for chronic insomnia in adults. But nowadays, I do see this technique kind of grouped into sleep hygiene or healthy sleep habits or kind of general sleep advice. But it is actually considered a monotherapy, which, by the way, it's called stimulus control. And monotherapy, as in you could potentially just practice this one technique and potentially see improvement in your overall sleep quality. Because what that does over time is it actually trains your brain to create a very strong association with your physical bed as being a place for sleep. And that's what we want, versus a place for being awake. And so this is a helpful technique to help prevent insomnia from developing, which is definitely multifaceted for a number of different reasons. But usually with insomnia, or when it gets to a point where it's a problem, it's because the bed has been associated with being awake or tossing and turning during the night. So yes, we want to remove that from the bed in the bedroom as best as possible, which helps improve our overall sleep quality.
Oh, okay. Now I'm curious with insomnia, is it mainly the bed has become a function for multiple things? Could it also be not sleeping in the same place consistently, like falling asleep on the couch and then kind of, is it again like losing track of habit here?
Yes. And it could look either of those ways. It could also be the anxiety or worry around sleep that sometimes develops in terms of sleep actually becoming a fear or a phobia, the fear of not being able to fall asleep or the fear of being awake during the night. But yes, oftentimes it is a combination of sorts as far as how it develops, but it's very common to experience insomnia where the bed has essentially been kind of conditioned as a place for being awake as well as potentially for sleep. But it's almost like sleep and awake get blurred together. And so
Mm.
the best approach there, at least in terms of more of this CBT for insomnia perspective, is to remove yourself from your bed whenever you are awake.
Again, what's so powerful for me is hearing how so much of this is based on creating habit and just consistency and training yourself to do it. There are challenges within that, with keeping the
Yeah.
same schedule on the weekend, with syncing with your partner, or carving out that extra time to make sure that you're connected. So a lot of
Yes.
dedication and willingness to change and adapt your
Mhm.
schedule. I'm curious about, well, you mentioned sleep hygiene. I'd love to dive into what that entails. And the other
Yes.
question that I'll pocket after is getting into medication and sleeping aids. I'm kind of curious about that too.
So, sleep hygiene, also known as healthy sleep habits or general sleep advice, that's usually what you're going to find whenever you Google, how to get better sleep or how to get deeper sleep. So sleep hygiene is kind of this umbrella term that really does speak to a lot of behaviors or habits that you might be doing during the day or before bed that can ultimately really impact your overall sleep quality. So for example, things like you don't want to eat dinner too close to bed because you don't want your body to be focusing on digestion. You want to be able to, transition to sleep easily. So the general rule of thumb there is to really try to eat dinner at least 3 to 4 hours before bedtime. Along those lines, you don't want to be drinking alcohol too close to bed or using stimulants too close to bed, caffeine included. So, cutting off caffeine earlier in the day. And that, of course, is going to look different for everyone's chronotype. So timing of
Mm.
that can vary. But really being mindful of substances and what you consume during the day and cutting those off early enough before bed so that they don't impact your ability to fall asleep easily. Also, things like keeping your bedroom dark, cave like, a cool temperature, quiet, all of those amazing things, which are so important. You want to optimize your sleep environment. You want it to be a really cool, dark, comfortable space. But the thing that I tend to see, which is, more so along the lines of having insomnia or more severe sleep issues, is a lot of women will be doing all of these sleep hygiene behaviors. They could even be, doing all of these amazing things, but they still may not be sleeping well. And that is because
Mhm.
sleep hygiene or healthy sleep habits, they're important. They're part of the picture in terms of maintaining healthy sleep. But that's the difference is sleep hygiene is not a treatment. It's not a treatment for
Mhm.
insomnia. And when we're dealing with insomnia, which is a problem, sleep hygiene alone isn't usually enough to help women sleep better. And so a treatment like cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia is not sleep hygiene. They are very specific techniques that actually in research studies, they're compared against sleep hygiene and
Mm.
sleep hygiene being kind of the control group. And so what we find is these very specific techniques are much more effective than just sleep hygiene alone. So sleep hygiene is important. It should be part of the whole picture, but generally, because it's not a treatment for insomnia, it's not going to cure insomnia. It's not usually going to move the needle for most women. And it really does help to maintain good sleep if you already have good sleep. But if you have
Mm.
insomnia, it's usually not enough.
I see. It's not the root of your insomnia. It's more the symptoms. So you can make the space nice and cozy, but you're not dealing with the root, when you do that.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And that is really the focus of my work as well, is really trying to identify the root cause or causes as to why someone may not be sleeping well in the first place. And so typically it isn't something that's sleep hygiene related. Maybe in some cases, like if someone is very sensitive to caffeine and they're consuming jumbo size cups throughout the day and right before bed, sure, that probably is having an impact on their sleep. But for most women, they're usually pretty mindful of their caffeine, or if they've tried cutting back on caffeine or cutting off their caffeine earlier in the day, and that still doesn't make an impact or a dent in their sleep. So it really, in terms of sleep hygiene, it really isn't the thing that usually makes all the difference when we're dealing with a problem like insomnia.
Yeah, it's also, if scaling back on caffeine is probably our first line of defense because we know that one. It's out
Mm-hmm.
there. Caffeine is a stimulant, so if you take it before bed, you won't sleep. But that's like chasing the symptoms, right? It's
Yeah,
like, oh, well, I need to scale back caffeine, but I'm so exhausted because I'm not sleeping well. So I need caffeine. And it's this
it's
cycle
a
of,
vicious
of
cycle.
dependency. And so then I'm curious if we're talking about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and kind of helping with insomnia and these deeper sleep issues, would you then say it's about reframing someone's connection to sleep that is kind of more the root?
Yes, yes. And I'm so glad that you brought this up because that's a huge part of more the cognitive piece of CBT for insomnia is learning how to reframe any negative thoughts or beliefs around sleep. And what that comes down to for a lot of women is changing their relationship with sleep. And that also involves oftentimes kind of changing their identity around sleep. So, for example, I probably hear this once a day, things along the lines of like, I've always been a bad sleeper. I've always been an insomniac. I've always been a light sleeper. I've never been able to sleep without taking something, right? They're very limiting beliefs in that, the brain has essentially connected this identity to sleep itself. And over time, that does create this very unhealthy relationship with sleep. And it's so interesting because we think about sleep training in babies and kids, where we always kind of have this wind down routine, this bedtime routine with babies and kids. But then at some point that just kind of
Yeah.
goes out the window.
That's a great point. It's such a ceremony when you're a baby and you're
Huh?
being put in your crib and coddled and read a bedtime story and you're just slowly getting into bed. You're right. It's a very beautiful process that
It
totally gets
really
lost
is.
as you
It
grow.
gets lost. Yeah. And I think, probably somewhere in middle school and high school, it kind of gets lost when things start to get really busy and then lots of stress enters the picture, a lot more responsibilities. But adults need sleep training too. And so that is such a huge part of really trying to identify that root cause of why someone may not be sleeping well. And I do find that it often does kind of go back to early childhood and how someone may or may not have had a structured bedtime routine, or maybe someone's parents also had some sleep issues. Like, I often hear, oh, my mom hasn't slept for years. Well, that's virtually impossible, but also like those types of beliefs around sleep, they get ingrained from a very young age, depending on how we are sleep trained, but then also how our parents sleep or our grandparents sleep. So
Totally.
this is a huge part of really identifying that underlying root cause. And oftentimes it is, or it has a lot to do with thoughts and beliefs around sleep and how someone maybe views their relationship to sleep and their identity.
I absolutely believe that. Our mindset and our perspective on things is what gives us the power to be and do. And so, if we've given all of our power to, I'm a bad sleeper, I don't sleep enough, haha, and kind of brush it off, then, oh, you're not in
Mhm.
control of your sleep. sleep has control over you. You don't know how to adjust it. You can't help yourself there. And, something really interesting that just popped in my mind, I've never made this connection, but when I was 6 years old, I got my tonsils taken out because I guess I was waking up a lot during the night.
Mhm.
And so I was told that I wasn't sleeping well through the night at a really young age. My dad has sleep apnea and wears a
Mhm.
mask that helps him get air down his
Mhm.
throat and or keep his tongue from curling back into his throat. So I grew up with that. I grew up with not having tonsils and it was tough for you to sleep, so we had to take them all out. And
Mhm.
yeah, like that can have a deep impact. That's really fascinating.
And that's such a
Totally.
great example. Yeah. So something that you can identify, at 6 years old, where you are essentially told, well, you're not sleeping well. And that does kind of carry into the identity that you may have developed when it comes to sleep. And that's
Totally.
not to say that we can't change it, right? I mean, that's really what the focus of CBT for insomnia is all about, is recognizing that there maybe has been this identity around sleep, but using that as an opportunity to bring more awareness, because that's the first step, having
I
that
was just thinking
awareness.
that. I was like, yeah, awareness brings problem solving.
Yes, yes. And then learning how to reframe and shift your mindset around sleep, essentially. And I think it also ties into something that I like to call sleep confidence, which
I
is
love
really
that.
having confidence in your natural sleep ability. And that's something that I find is especially true in women is, if you haven't been sleeping well in, the last few years or even longer than that, you start to lose confidence in your ability to sleep. And that's where a lot of women will reach for the Benadryl, the ZQuil, the melatonin, or potentially, go to their doctor and get prescribed a sleeping pill. And while, I'm not opposed to sleep aids as a short-term tool, what I tend to see is a lot of people will start using a sleep aid or get prescribed a sleeping medication, and they're not really taught how to realistically come off of them at some point. So there really isn't ever a long-term plan.
Right. Right. There's that desire that will fix all the issues, and then that can kind of brew this dependency. That's maybe the essence here is it's an aid. It helps you maybe build the habit of sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the habit of sleeping. That's hard to dissociate because once you are kind of building a routine and structure around that, I can see, yeah, what you're saying. But then that all goes back to if you're using a sleeping aid, it's building that non attachment to it of this is just getting me on track. And yeah, with anything, with alcohol, with all of these substances that are really easy to lean into, it's that balance and that reframe, that self-empowerment that this is my personal tool. This is my way of getting back into habit. But
Yeah.
I also wanted to say what's really fascinating here for me is I'm thinking about food and how we have diet culture and all these getting skinny, looking hot for summer, eating less, fasting this, like so many trends in this space. And it's such a big market for tips and tricks and sneak arounds. But the essence is our body knows our hunger cues when we're full, what feels good. We
Mm-hmm.
can trust that. It's hard to because it's very appealing to get some quick processed food, fill up your gut and move on with your day and just, keep powering through. And I think sleep here kind of just the same. Like it's this unglamorous operation that is
Mm-hmm.
so necessary to our survival and our health. And so I really want to take a second. I would love for you to share the benefits of
Mm.
what good quality sleep can do. And then the flip side, when you're not sleeping well, how that can impact you.
Yeah. Yeah. Love this. And I just want to take a second to really appreciate the analogy that you provided in terms of hunger cues,
Mm-hmm.
and how we are kind of thrown a lot of tips and tricks and hacks and things in the wellness space and on social media and online. And sleep is kind of this not so glamorous thing, but I could argue that it is the foundation for all these other areas of our lifestyle. I mean, there's been studies where, if you don't necessarily get enough sleep, you're more bound to eat 500 or more calories the next day as a result. So it actually throws off your hunger cues. So if sleep isn't dialed in, that does impact these other biological processes. But along those lines, when we think about hunger cues and knowing that we can't force ourselves to feel hungry, we can certainly influence when we might feel hungry because we can eat at certain times and predict when we might feel hungry each day. It's kind of the same idea when it comes to our sleepy cues. We can't force our bodies to feel sleepy, but we can certainly influence when we might feel sleepy based on how we go about our day. And a lot of those lifestyle factors, like when we eat, what our level of activity is, and how much light we get versus how much artificial light we get. So all of these areas that truly do impact when we might feel sleepy and our sleepy cues kick in. So I love that analogy because hunger drive is very similar to sleep drive. And they're biological processes that we ultimately can't force. We can influence, but we have to trust that our bodies will take care of those processes for us.
Yeah, there's a surrender there, a trust.
There is.
With our body.
Yeah, I love that word, surrender. There is absolutely a surrender to the process, and knowing that you can certainly set the stage for sleep to happen, but when it happens is a matter of trusting that your brain will take care of that process for you. So going back to your question in terms of, the benefits of quality sleep, I first want to define what quality sleep means.
Oh, great.
Because there are a lot of misconceptions about sleep, but also just in the sea of information overload, sometimes it's hard to really know what that means. So when we think about what quality sleep is, there are a couple different components. So one being the sleep regularity or sleep consistency piece. So how consistent your sleep schedule is across the week. And then there's also the timing of when sleep happens. So is your sleep window or your sleep schedule aligned with your chronotype, with your biology? So regularity and timing, so important. And then how long it takes you to fall asleep. So ideally, quality sleep means that you can fall asleep within 30 minutes, give or take. So it shouldn't happen too quickly, shouldn't happen right away. That could actually be a sign that you're not getting enough sleep. And it also shouldn't take too long, shouldn't take more than 30 minutes to fall asleep. So I'd say kind of the sweet spot would be about 15 to 20 minutes, but really up to 30 minutes to fall asleep would be considered normal or healthy. And then waking up during the night, that's also a really big misconception about sleep, that we should be totally unconscious and not wake up at all. But we wake up a lot during the night, whether or not we realize. And women actually tend to wake up more during the night, whether or not they have memory. But up to 30 minutes or so time awake during the night is also considered normal or healthy. So 30 minutes kind of on the front end.
I'm so grateful you just said that because I do wake up quite often for like a minute or two and then I go back.
Which is absolutely, it's a normal part of our sleep-wake cycle. People forget there's that wake piece in it where there are these natural times that we wake up, especially through the night, usually after we complete each sleep cycle, which is on average about 90 to 120 minutes, we wake up. So I think for most folks, especially like that first sleep cycle, you might sleep the first hour or two pretty consistently. And then like clockwork, you might find yourself waking up to use the bathroom. Waking up isn't inherently bad during the night as long as you can fall back to sleep quickly.
So I have a quick question here then. Yeah. With meditation, I'm a big fan of yoga nidra, which is like yogic sleep. And
I am too.
Love it. It's the sacred rest, and I absolutely love it. So is that kind of the same methodology then? If we have this like 90-minute sleep-wake cycle and we're dropping really deep into this parasympathetic state, and it does, because they make analogies all the time. It's like getting 4 hours of sleep doing a 1 hour yoga nidra. I'm not sure the science on that, but I'm curious. Is it kind of because you're going through like a cycle similar to sleep, or what's the
I'd say
science there?
so. Yeah, I would agree with you there. I don't know that there has been any research that has looked at yoga nidra and specific impacts on sleep, but of the research that maybe is out there, what I will say is that yes, it is very much about nervous system regulation and that parasympathetic process, which is ideally the state that we want to be in when we get into bed, so that sleep happens easily, as well as during the night, so that we can fall back to sleep easily if we do find ourselves waking up during the night. So yeah, I think there's probably some variability as far as the timing goes within each person. But absolutely, I think there are probably some really amazing parallels between the benefits of yoga nidra and sleep wake timing.
Okay. And is it more that with yoga nidra, it trains your body on how to get into a parasympathetic state, and that is helpful for night sleeping versus the actual act of yoga nidra being like, okay, well, if I slept 2 hours last night, but I did some yoga nidra now, I balanced out. It's training the body to get into that restful state.
Exactly. Exactly. So it could be yoga nidra, could really be your favorite type of relaxation activity, whether it's deep breathing or meditation. It's more so about how you prepare your body for sleep. So when you actually start to change the physiology of your nervous system and bring your body into more of that rest and digest, that ultimately is what sets the stage for sleep to happen. And that's the ultimate goal of either practicing yoga nidra or something similar. And that is also going to look different for each person, since we all find different things relaxing, versus some other activities. It really is finding what works best for you.
Okay, beautiful. But going back to, so waking up to 30 minutes at night is normal because that's just one sleep cycle done.
Yep, yep. So it is okay to wake up. It's okay to embrace a little bit of time awake during the night. And again, as long as you can fall back to sleep quickly and, within 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, give or take, that's totally fine. It is a very normal part of how we transition through our different sleep stages during the night. So embracing a bit of wakefulness and tuning into also that sleep regularity, consistency, and also the timing of sleep and when that happens. And then also the last piece of sleep quality, and in terms of having good sleep quality, is how efficient you're sleeping. So what the sleep community likes to call sleep efficiency. And that is essentially the relationship between the time that you're spending in bed versus the time that you're actually sleeping. And we want that sleep efficiency to be high, and typically 85% or higher sleep efficiency is ideal. But I'm not so concerned about the number. What that really means is you want to be sleeping the majority of time that you're in bed. So you don't want to be in bed for too long, not too long of time awake during the night. You want to really be sleeping the majority of time that you're physically in bed. And that really speaks to having good sleep quality overall. So there are a number of different components there.
And that also means in the morning, if you wake up not staying in your bed for another hour, hour and a half.
Correct. But you know what? When you're sleeping well and you feel like your, sleep quality is decent on a regular basis, you can have those mornings on occasion and, not fear that it's going to completely throw things off. It's when that maybe becomes more of a regular habit where then the bed becomes a little bit blurry in terms of sleep and wake. And so, then that might be something to start to change. But it is absolutely fine to spend some extra cozy time in bed on occasion.
Yeah. And thanks for pointing that out. You're not the bad guy with tough sleep news. This is for the self-improving kind of skill set to get back in sync, to feel well rested, and to feel all of these beneficial effects that we're going to dovetail into what high quality sleep does for you.
Yes. Yes. And high quality sleep, well, I could argue that it literally impacts every single area of
Yeah.
our health. So cognitive health, emotional health, mental health, physical health, hormone health, you name it. There, isn't a system in the body that doesn't get affected by your overall sleep quality. And I'd say the biggest areas that I tend to see in my practice in terms of where things can kind of go south would be more of the brain health, the cognitive health. So people noticing changes in their ability to concentrate, pay attention, their memory. Also, the mental emotional health aspect of not getting good quality sleep. I don't think there's anyone on this planet that doesn't feel cranky or more irritable after a not so great night of sleep. So there are, I'd say, the very specific impacts on mood and how you might actually feel during the day. So the brain health, cognitive health, and then the mental emotional health, I'd say those are often like the first areas to go or to see some changes there. But ultimately, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, not getting high quality sleep also does impact physical health and your ability to make good food choices, your ability to feel motivated or have energy during the day. And so it really is, in my opinion, the foundation of optimal health. Start with your sleep. And I heard you say this, but just want to reiterate, sleep is a skill. Sleep is a skill. And just like any other skill, when there's practice and consistency and you're actually prioritizing the skill, you will absolutely see improvements in overall sleep quality. And I think a lot of people are surprised at how just by making a few tweaks here and there with their daily schedule and their habits, that their overall sleep quality can actually start to improve fairly quickly, like within a couple of weeks. It's not overnight, although you might start to notice some benefits in mood and energy and then things of that nature. But usually within a couple of weeks, most folks are feeling like their sleep quality is much better. And then that, of course, ties into all of these other aspects of our overall health and well-being.
Thank you for really making it a clear discussion on what is going on in our bodies, how to recognize where we may not fully be trusting ourselves, how to slowly readjust to that. I love finding your natural sleep, that chronotype. I
Me
think
too.
that's a great sneaky tool. I can see that being really hard. Just the initiative that takes of, okay, I'll block off a couple of weeks, I'll go on vacation just to see what my sleep is like, or really with that intention and enjoy wherever you are. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of distractions, including jet lag. Now you're in a new environment. So I wanted to kind of come back to that one as a really, really powerful tool and also offer a lot of self-compassion with that tool because you're in a different environment, because there's things to see. And that's why I like you said, give yourself 2 weeks. Don't try to resolve it 3 days and track your sleep and go crazy with it, but maybe let yourself kind of ease into that and see what comes out naturally.
Yes, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Ease into it, give your body time to adjust. And absolutely, there are some other factors, like if you are on vacation and experiencing jet lag, and being in a new place. So jet lag, I'd say just as a side note, the number of time zones that you travel is typically the number of days at a minimum that it may take you to fully
Oh,
adjust.
cool.
So, that of course looks different for everybody. There are some people who have what's called circadian flexibility and they can adjust very quickly. And then there are some people where sleep maybe is more vulnerable. It might take a little bit longer. So it really does depend on how far you're traveling. And so it does take your body some time to fully adjust to local time.
Mm.
So that certainly can play a role there. And then sleeping in a different location, sleeping in a new place. When we think about sleep from more of a survival standpoint, when we're asleep and we're unconscious, we're very vulnerable to the outside world. And so sometimes there is actually what's called the first night effect, where when you're sleeping in a new location, you actually may experience some insomnia or some sleep disruption because your brain doesn't know if your new environment is safe yet. And when it comes down to sleeping soundly, the brain has to feel safe. And so that kind of underlying unconscious process is also playing a really big role whenever you're away from home or staying at somebody else's house.
Wow, I am so happy that nugget got snuck in here. Again, it's alluding to the natural inclinations of our body, our survival mode, what we need to feel safe. And it takes away that narrative of I'm bad at adjusting on vacation. I'm whatever you fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many going back to like, limiting beliefs, and the cognitive behavioral framework here is really getting back that we are a body. We're on a clock. We're a bunch of hormones and neurons firing and fuel and needing rest.
Yes.
So just kind of the more we can work back into that mindset and let go of our human experience with it, yeah, the more easeful I feel like these adjustments become. Because even hearing that clarity of, yeah, of course it could be hard when you're in a new environment because your body doesn't know where you are.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with, that's no judgment of your character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
powerful. Wow, I feel like we can have so many more discussions. And
I know there's so
I'm like,
much ground to cover with sleep. But, I think it's so hard these days just with all of the information that's out there about sleep to really know what's true and what you should be doing. And, it truly is unique to each individual. One person's sleep preference isn't going to be the same from the other. And so it really is, I'd say, ideal if sleep is an area of vulnerability to work with a sleep specialist because you may not, get that special attention from providers who maybe don't have this specialty training. And it really is specialty training. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, most docs don't get any sleep training during medical school or graduate school. In my opinion, if you can work with a sleep specialist, you can definitely get more of that personalized approach to your unique chronotype, your sleep schedule, your sleep habits, things that are going to best align for your unique sleep needs. And that can be incredibly powerful since we at any age need that sleep training.
as you're saying that too, I'm thinking, you said, medical providers, residents, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, residents don't even sleep kind of ever.
I know.
It's really sad. But yeah, I'm like, ooh, yeah, that would not be easy to rely on, or I can understand how a lot of medical health providers don't have the holistic mindset around sleep because it hasn't been taught or provided for them.
Yeah. Yeah. In my opinion, it's a systemic issue.
Yeah.
It's slowly changing. I mean, in the last, I think maybe 5 years, resident programs have kind of peeled back on how long their shifts should be. So they're, really taking into account how important sleep is. But yeah, a lot of healthcare providers, first responders, people who are shift workers, it's a challenge to work a schedule like that and to be able to not get good quality sleep on a regular basis. Hopefully, at least for residents, that's a temporary thing. But some folks, will choose to have a position like that. And it does eventually take a toll on overall health.
The pros and cons of being such a big country and growing fast, but there is a lot of recognition these days, and hopefully bigger and bigger shifts to come to make sleep this foundational, sacred opportunity for us all. And I'm curious from you, if you can share how we can connect with you and the different kind of offerings that you do have.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So I am at Dr. Sarah Sleep on social platforms, and I'm the most active on Instagram. So you can find me there, and I'm always happy to be a resource since the sleep community is so small. If you're ever looking for a sleep specialist, insomnia specialist, I'd be happy to try to connect to a local provider or at least just provide some resources. So at Dr. Sarah Sleep. And as far as my current offerings, I do have a CBTI starter course. So if you're interested in CBTI, or maybe you can't find a local provider, which is really hard sometimes since there aren't many CBTI specialists. And in fact, the last I checked, there's less than 800 in the world.
Wow.
So it can be
What
really
is the
hard.
I at the end? CBTI?
Insomnia.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can be hard to find someone. And I totally get that. And so I always try to connect folks to someone local. So I'm happy to do so. So I do have a CBTI starter course. So again, like for someone who is interested, can't find someone local, or because there's so few specialists, there's often really long wait lists, like sometimes 3 months, 6 months to even get started. This would be kind of like an intro course to really just start with CBTI and learn the very specific techniques that I usually teach my one-on-one clients, but in more of a self-paced online course format. So I have that. And then I also have a signature group program that actually combines CBTI techniques with genetic testing, because I do think that there is a huge, huge area there that is worth looking into for most folks. So it's a DNA-based strategy, and that is specifically for women as well. So it's not only targeting any negative thoughts or beliefs around sleep, any behaviors or habits that might be interfering with getting good quality sleep, but it's also looking at the potential genetic components and genetic tendencies that could also be influencing sleep quality. And that really goes very granular. So it looks at nutrition, gut health, food sensitivities, micronutrients, macronutrients, hormone health, metabolic health, oxidative stress, detox pathways. It goes very deep.
Wow.
So really looking at things from a very holistic perspective. And so that is also it's a group program that I run, usually a couple times a year. And so depending on where someone is at on their sleep journey, I have options along the way, because we all, of course, all have different needs, all are at different points in terms of maybe having insomnia, or maybe someone who already has pretty good sleep but wants to optimize their sleep. So more of the sleep optimization, that is certainly something that I support as well. And I think that's it for now. I'm always working on new programs and things behind the scenes, but really those are my two signature programs that really try to address sleep issues from more of a root cause perspective.
Awesome. I'm so grateful for all of the work that you do and the way that you speak about everything. I have a kind of a silly ending question, because this just popped in my mind. Something that's been very much life-changing for me in sleep is this weighted blanket eye mask that I have. And I didn't realize how sensitive to light I was. I thought it was just sound, but that completely, it helps me fall asleep very comfortably. It helps me stay asleep, and waking up from a night where I have that eye shade on. And this sounds like a sponsored ad. I wish it was. And I had a bunch of these, but it's not. But waking up from a night using that weighted blanket on my eyes is just a different world than my sleep before. And so I'm curious from you if you have any little like fun sleep toys like that work.
I love that you brought this up. So first, I just want to say it was very similar to kind of using a weighted blanket or a weighted eye mask. There's this sense of comfort and grounding. So I kind of compare it to how, like, when we're babies and we're swaddled in blankets and it's dark, it's cave-like, it's cozy. It's kind of that same experience. It provides this grounding effect, which can really impact your senses while you sleep and the experience of sleep. So I always say, like, if you can find something like that, that really does make a difference. Absolutely use it. As far as gadgets that I like, so yes, I'm a big fan of these sleep gadgets and optimization tools, but I also really like to stress the foundations as well. Having those
Mhm.
in place first are so, so important. Really with the sleep consistency, keeping your sleep schedule, the light, the dark, all of that. These are tools that can further optimize. And I am all about it, but also having those foundations in place too. So, so important. So I'd say one of my favorite, it's not necessarily gadget, but sleep product would be blackout curtains.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that is very ideal to really just make your bedroom cave-like. And I say cave-like because ideally you don't want to even be able to see your hand when the light's off. So 100% blackout curtains. And this is not sponsored either, although I am affiliated. So Sleep Out curtains, they
Mhm.
are fantastic and they use non-toxic fabric, which is also something that I'm very passionate about, more than non-toxic, low toxic living. We often don't think about those fabrics that might be in our bedroom that can really impact how we breathe because of the air quality and the impacts of the fabrics. So I love
Mm.
that the blackout curtains, and that can really optimize your sleep space. And then I also am a big fan of eye masks if they're blackout as well. So I will use those typically, like if I'm traveling, so on the plane, if I'm needing to sleep, or in a hotel room, and maybe there's a whole bunch of gadgets that emit a lot of light and you can't really control that. So definitely a blackout mask can be really helpful. And then lately, I have actually been really liking some breathing gadgets, and specifically, so one is called the Oxalife device, it's kind of a band that sits around your waist that is a biofeedback tool. So it helps
Mm.
with really giving you real-time feedback and teaching you how to breathe in a pattern that ultimately does support quality sleep. So I've been really
Wow.
loving that lately, as well as a similar device, but it's a little bit different, called the Moonbird, which is a handheld breathing coach. You actually like put the device in your hand and it walks you through a guided breathing exercise. So those are not necessarily sleep specific, but they support sleep in that they're really teaching you how to leverage that parasympathetic rest and digest process throughout the day, which ultimately prepares your body for sleep at night. So
I
those are my
love
current
that.
faves.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you. And again, most of this conversation is like the foundational need for sleep and how to start achieving that and getting closer and closer to that result. And so these gadgets, right, are like something to be optimize or enjoy your sleep or build in more ritual, and can be
Yes.
those like little tips to make it fun, to make it something that you're committed to and consistent with. So, yes, thank you. Thank you for making that distinction. And
Yeah,
again,
of
thank you
course.
for being here and having this
Well, thank you.
discussion and sharing your wisdom. And it's wild after this conversation and even going into it, I felt like, wow, sleep. It's so hard to remember how important it is. And
Yeah.
of course, the day before I was like, I should go to bed early. I'm talking about sleep tomorrow. And it's kind of just something that unfortunately slips my mind so often. And so I'm really grateful that you exist, that you're bringing that shift in our perspective in society,
Oh,
that
thank
sleep is
you.
cool. Sleep is so
Sleep is
necessary.
cool. Sleep is sexy. Yes. Sleep is cool. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I so appreciate always having a conversation about sleep. And you are not alone as far as like the going to bed early. I often hear that from my clients, like the night before our sessions are like, oh, I needed to do all of this. I forgot to do, like, so what it comes down to is really just listening to your body, tuning back into what your body actually needs, and then prioritizing as best as you can, because none of us are ever going to be perfect in today's world. Just with all of the things that get thrown at us. And so you, in that sense, do the best that you can to keep things consistent, but it doesn't have to be perfect by any means.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. And my body says thank you for the reminder on sleep.
Yes. I know.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I need that reminder too.
It's so simple and it's a challenge. And it's a challenge that so many people face and have so many issues I'm sure you've seen throughout the years
Right.
and kind of presenting problems. And I love something that's so distilled of, okay, there's these emotions, or these relationships, there's all this tension. How's your sleep?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that just
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question as well because you can really tell a lot by how someone is sleeping. You
That's
can.
powerful. That is so powerful. Well, Sarah, thank you so, so much. It's
Of
been such a
course.
pleasure.
Of course. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it's been amazing chatting with you. And thank you again for having me. I so appreciate you, asking me to be here and for reaching out, and always so grateful to have a conversation like this. So thank you.
Mm, means a lot. Thank you. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Sounds good.